Hello there, watching L24 Midnight News, streaming live from the capital Algiers, and to the headlines. Algerian government announced the control of 80% of the forest fires and the start of inspection operations to compensate those affected. In Palestine, 3 martyrs shot dead by the Zionist occupation in Nablus, and the Palestinian presidency describes the assassination as a war crime. A blockade hangs over the political scene in Spain after the results of the legislative elections amid anticipation of negotiations to form the government. In Russia-Ukraine conflict, Moscow confirms the dead end of returning to the grain agreement due to the West's disregard of its conditions. Hello again and welcome. The Algerian Civil Protection Services managed to control 80% of the fires that broke out across 16 provinces of the country, while extinguishing operations continue in 13 hotspots spread across 7 provinces. A statement by the Algerian Ministry of the Interior revealed that human and material resources mobilized and the effectiveness of air interventions were factors that enabled the civil protection to put out most of the fires. Meanwhile, local authorities in the areas affected by the fires in Algeria began to inspect the damages in order to proceed with compensation procedures. Now in Tunisia, but in a related matter, Tunisian civil protection and security teams began an evacuation mission of residents living in the region affected by the wildfires that are approaching residential areas. Spokesman for Tunisian Civil Protection said priority was given to protecting residential communities in the region and to prevent the blaze from reaching an airport in the area. In a different matter, the Chief of Staff of People's National Army, General Said Chengriha, received on Tuesday the Army Staff Headquarters his Italian counterpart, Admiral Giuseppe Gavo Dragon, in the presence of the commanders of the forces and the gendarmerie and the members of the Italian military delegation. During his meeting with his Italian counterpart, who is in an official visit to Algeria, at the head of the important military delegation, the Algerian Chief of Staff stressed that Algerian-Italian relations are based on mutual trust established after decades of positive and constructive cooperation and a common history of Mediterranean values. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, received the Commissioner for Education, Science, Technology and Innovation of the African Union, Mohamed Belhassin, who is on a working visit to Algeria. The two parties reviewed cooperation between Algeria and the African Union as to embody the objectives of Continental Agenda 2063, particularly in the area of education, which will be the main theme of the next session of the Summit of Heads of State and Government of Africa. The meeting was an opportunity to highlight and emphasize in particular the need to readjust the priorities of the African Union in line with the aspirations and also aspirations of African states and peoples, and to pursue them by relying on African resources in order to preserve the independence of the collective political decision of Africa states and to prevent external interventions in continental organizations' affairs. Also, the Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, had talks at the ministry headquarters with the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State in charge of International Organizations Affairs, Michel Sisson, who is on a working visit to Algeria. A statement by the Algerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the talks between the two parties focused on the most prominent areas of bilateral cooperation and strategic dialogue, especially the prospects for enhancing coordination in various international organizations and bodies led by Human Rights Council, Security Council of United Nations. To a different matter now, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed on Tuesday to continue supplying African countries with grain in an article published by the Kremlin and the Russia and Africa, uniting efforts for peace, progress and successful future. The article was published on the occasion of the second Russia-Africa summit to be held in St. Petersburg on the 27th of this month till the 28th of this month, summit dedicated to consolidating ties between Russia and the African continent. Our special envoy in St. Petersburg, Sarah Lal, tell us more.
Hours only before the official launch of the Russia-Africa summit here in the city of St. Petersburg, Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated in a message to African leaders and African countries that Russia promotes the principle of African solutions to African problems, reiterating once more that Russia fully supports countries who aspire to their freedom and self-determination. In another context, Russian president also stated that Russia has and aspires to a mutually beneficial relation with African countries, stating that back in 2022 only the exchange volume reached $18 billion between Africa and Russia. And Russia also supports the creation of the zone of free exchange and free trade in Africa called ZLECAf. Also, a Russian president indicated that Russia will continue to export to Africa in spite of the sanctions imposed to the country regarding the grain deal, and that from a humanitarian standpoint. From St. Petersburg, Russia, Sarah Alal for Al24 News.
That was our special envoy, Sarah from St. Petersburg. In a different matter, China's top diplomat Wang Yi on Monday said Beijing was willing to further push China-South Africa relations to a higher level and expand cooperation in new fields. He made the remarks while meeting with the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Nelendi Pandor. Mr. Wang added that BRICS mechanism is the most important platform for representatives of emerging markets and major developing countries to strengthen dialogue and cooperation. In the Middle East, 3 Palestinian youngsters were killed Tuesday by the Zionist occupation forces in Nablus in the occupied West Bank at the gate of Mount Gerizim. The Palestinian news agency said that occupation soldiers opened fire at a car carrying 3 Palestinian youths. Official and popular condemnation have increased, while the Palestinian factions vowing a tough retaliation. And on this matter, the spokesman of the Palestinian presidency, Nabil Abu Rudaina, said that the assassination of 3 young men by occupation forces near the gate of Mount Gerizim in Nablus on Tuesday is a war crime. Abu Rudaina added that the occupation government is the only one that bears the consequences of aggression and crimes that are taken. In a related matter, the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Tuesday at the presidential complex in Turkish capital Ankara. During the meeting, both leaders discussed the ongoing Zionist attacks against Palestinians and talks about the dangerous acceleration in settlement activity in addition to the seizure of Palestinian lands. The Turkish president affirmed Turkey's stances in support of Palestinian people and their right to freedom. independence and the establishment of the independent state.
أمام هذه الممارسات الإسرائيلية المتواصلة.
In the face of Israel's continuous practices and its endeavor to perpetuate its occupation of Palestine, the Palestinian leadership has taken many decisions aimed at protecting our legitimate national rights in light of an unprecedented international silence and an inability to hold this occupation accountable for its crimes against our people and our sanctities. Here I say that there are 1,000 resolutions in the United Nations, none of which has been implemented.
Bölgede adil ve kalıcı bir barışın tek yolu.
The only way to adjust and lasting peace in the region is to defend the vision of a two-state solution. It is not possible for us to accept actions to change the historical status quo of holy places, especially Al-Aqsa Mosque. Unity and reconciliation among our Palestinian brothers is one of the key elements in this process.
Temel unsurlardan biridir.
To Spain now, where opposition People's Party leader Alberto Núñez Feijóo and his socialist rival Pedro Sánchez embarked on negotiations seeking alliances that would allow one of them to take power and avoid runoff. Nabil Khazini.
72 hours after the results of the legislative election, Spain remains in uncertainty and in fear of a return to the polls. The country finds itself without a clear majority after Sunday's election. Neither the right-wing People's Party, which came out on top, nor the Socialist Party seem able to form a majority. It's time now for lengthy coalition talks or potentially a new vote if no majority is secured.
The People's Party will try to form a government. The King will tell the PP's leader, the People's Party leader, to try and form a government. It will speak with the Socialists. It will ask them to support him as the winner of the election. The Socialists will not do that. Then he will probably move to negotiate with Vox, the far-right party, to its right. But it will be really not a negotiation. They know they don't have the numbers.
But the way to forming a government will be long. This is due to the fragmented political landscape in Spain. Regional and nationalist parties who won the remaining seats in parliament could be the deciding factors in forming the next government. But if the political deadlock is not resolved, Spain will be in front of weeks, if not months, of arduous negotiations to form a government coalition.
Bueno, pues podemos hacer una pregunta. ¿Sirvieron para algo?
We can ask ourselves a question. Have the elections been of any use? Because we have established a kind of political blockade, and we need a lot of intelligence from the leaders to get out of this political blockade.
If neither Feijóo nor Sánchez can reach a majority, Spaniards will have to vote in another general election, their sixth in 8 years.
Still in Europe now, the Kremlin has rejected a call by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to rejoin the Black Sea grain deal until an agreement on Russia's interests is implemented by the West. Reem Zian has the report.
Despite calls to renew the Black Sea grain deal, a return to it is impossible for the time being. This is the latest Kremlin statement on the vital agreement. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged Russia to allow Ukraine to export grain from its seaport again.
I call on the Russian Federation to return to the implementation of the Black Sea Initiative in line with my latest proposal. And I urge the global community to stand united for effective solutions in this essential effort.
UN Deputy Spokesperson confirmed the UN's endeavors to renew the deal.
We continue to pursue, as we have said, the efforts to make sure that exports of food and fertilizer from both Ukraine and the Russian Federation can proceed. As the Secretary General has made clear, he has not given up on this because it's essential, not just for those two countries, but for the well-being of the world.
But the Kremlin suggested Guterres' proposal didn't address its main complaint that there had been no progress on a related agreement that was designed to facilitate Russian food and fertilizer exports amid Western sanctions.
Indeed, Mr. Guterres' letter contained a plan, a certain plan of action, a promise to fulfill the part of the deal related to Russia one day. Regrettably, it's impossible to return to the deal now because it hasn't been fulfilled. De facto, it has never been executed. That's why it's impossible. At the same time, President Vladimir Putin made it clear that Russia is ready to immediately return to the deal once as soon as it is executed.
Ukraine, one of the biggest exporters of grain, faces a potential ban on its grains exports from 5 European countries. Last May, the EU allowed Bulgaria, Hungary, Poland, Romania and Slovakia to ban domestic sales of Ukrainian wheat, maize, rapeseed and sunflower seeds while permitting transit of such cargoes for export elsewhere. As a result, Ukrainian farmers will have no choice but to put some of their harvest into storage, according to analysts. Russia's exit from the deal could directly impact prices of grains in the global markets. The IMF estimates an increase by 10 to 15%. Knowing that prices have already reached their highest level in the past couple of months. This prompts fears of a global food crisis that would be particularly tough for Yemen, Afghanistan and the Horn of Africa, among others.
In a related matter to Russia-Ukraine fight, the Russian Defense Ministry said that one of its Black Sea Fleet ships had destroyed 2 unmanned Ukrainian naval drones that had attempted to attack it overnight. The ministry's patrol ship was reportedly keeping an eye on ships in the southwestern Black Sea. According to the ministry, it had opened fire on the naval drones and destroyed them while causing no injuries. In a different matter, China appointed the veteran diplomat Wang Yi as its new foreign minister, removing Qin Gang after 1 month absence from duties. The ministry said he was off work for health reasons without giving any further details. Now, coming back to the wildfires across Europe, now thick smoke billowed from burning hilltops on the Greek island of Rhodes, while rapidly spreading wildfire that broke out at the center of the Spanish island of Gran Canaria forced people to evacuate their homes. Mohammed Khatal in this report.
Hundreds of firefighters were battling blazes that have raged on the Greek island of Rhodes since Wednesday and resurged in the hot, dry and windy conditions. Greek Prime Minister Kyriatos Mitsotakis warned of tough days ahead with blazes destroying homes and forcing the evacuation of thousands of tourists from the island.
The next few days, especially today, tomorrow, Thursday, will be difficult days. After that, I hope that the conditions will help us more, and that's why we all obviously remain on high alert. Let me state the obvious, that in the face of what the entire planet is facing, especially the Mediterranean, which is a hotspot for climate change, there is no magic defense. If there was, obviously we would have implemented it.
The fires will deal a blow to a tourism industry that is a mainstay of the Greek economy, and action to mitigate the impact of the devastating fire should be taken as emphasized by the Greek Premier.
This coordinated action can mitigate the consequences of the climate crisis, and this is what we will continue to do, with more forces, but with an even greater emphasis on interoperability, on better cooperation between the competent services, the competent ministries. That's something I think we have already mastered to a certain extent. We can get better. And of course in prevention actions, which will be the focus of our programming from now on.
Meanwhile, rapidly spreading wildfire that broke out at the center of the Spanish island of Gran Canaria on Tuesday forced the authorities to remove several hundred villagers from their homes, shut 3 roads and deploy helicopters to contain the blaze.
I was cleaning my home when I noticed the smoke around 12, and I called the emergency services 112. I couldn't see the smoke, but it smelled. I called 112 and they told me that emergency services were already there, trying to put the fire out, but 2 hours later it broke out of control.
Local authorities in the region of the Gran Canaria said that 100 firefighters and 9 aircrafts were working to put out the blaze that has so far burned through 200 hectares of forest, adding that no buildings have been harmed.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us in this late hour. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform, and you can watch our news in different languages: Arabic, Spanish, French, as well as in English. For this, all I can say at the end, take care of yourself. Good night.